So I'm really excited to talk about some things I've got coming up in August, some collaborations with some other booktubers. But first, let's just talk about what I read in July. And it was a pretty productive month for me because it was really hot, and then we had some wildfire smoke here in Montana. So it gave me some extra time to read in the evenings, and there's not much you can do about it. So I just kind of tried to make the best of it. Now, these 6 books that I finished this month, I will post my full video reviews of those down in the description if you want to find out more about them, just to speed this part up. So the first book I read was Fury by Henry Kuttner. This was also kind of co-written by his wife, C.L. Moore. And this was a really good example of some golden age science fiction. We have a main character who's not quite a hero, almost kind of villainous at times. It deals with some class issues between immortals and, the normal people around in civilization, and builds up to a really cool, interesting ending. So check that one out. I recommend that one for sure. The next one was On Wings of Song by Thomas M. Dish. And this was the first book I've read from Dish, and it was very interesting. I know it's not one of his most popular books. It went into some really weird places, went over some very unique themes. It's a really hard one to talk about or describe, but if you're intrigued, just watch my full review on that one. Next up was The Hopkins Manuscript by R.C. Sheriff. I really love this book. I have heard a lot of people call this a cozy catastrophe. It has to do with some astronomers discovering that the moon was heading towards the Earth, and you go through some pre-apocalyptic and then during the apocalypse and then some post-apocalyptic aspects of this moon crashing into the Earth. And while the science isn't, completely plausible, R.C. Sheriff really used this novel to go over a lot of elements of human nature, and he did a really good job. He only wrote a few novels from what I can tell, and I think this is the only science fiction-ish type book he wrote, but just beautiful writing. Very highly recommend that book. The next one I read was The Embedding by Ian Watson. This was a really cool book. It had some really interesting ideas. It had drugs and aliens and all these different aspects. One of the main central themes was language and how certain aspects of language work. But I found the book just kind of not going anywhere and kind of let me down the further I got into it. But still pretty fascinating. Definitely want to read more from Ian Watson, but it's kind of a hard one to recommend. Unless you watch my video and it sounds intriguing enough, maybe you still might want to check it out. And then was We All Died at Breakaway Station by Richard C. Meredith. This was a great one, and it's kind of a military science fiction. It has a lot of space battles and some really cool concepts with human modification, faster than light travel, faster than light communication. And it just has this tone of impending doom kind of through the whole narrative that keeps you engaged. There's a couple issues with it that I talk about in my full review, but this was another one that I would definitely recommend to people. And then the last book I read for the month was The Moon Pool by Abraham Merritt. Now, this was an interesting one. I'm really glad I read it. It's a kind of adventure lost world type book that has mostly some horror and then a lot of fantasy elements as you get later into the book, and a few little science fiction elements in it. But you can see a lot of influence in so many things through this book from other writers like H.P. Lovecraft and writers beyond that. And then even, I guess this is a big kind of inspiration for parts of Dungeons and Dragons, and it's in their Appendix N for that. So glad I read this. I'm not sure I'd go back to Abraham Merritt in the future, but it was still worthwhile read. Now, now we get to the book of the month. Now, both of the books that were contenders, the Hopkins manuscript and We All Died at Breakaway Station, these were both recommended from viewers of the channel. They definitely hit it out of the park with these two. But I think the Hopkins manuscript just edged it out. And it probably has to do more with my love of the post-apocalyptic genre. And I would say military science fiction is probably one of my least favorite subgenres, but this book still was amazing, even though that's not a real favorite subgenre of mine. So all those books, they're good, and both of those books were good. Check them out if you get a chance. So now let's go on to plans for August. I've got maybe too many collaborations going. We'll have to see how it all works out, but I think they're spaced out pretty good, and we got some different books. So the first book that I'm going to be doing a collaboration with Joseph from Joseph Reads Books is Gateway by Frederick Pohl. This has been a book I've wanted to read for decades. Joseph found some old book club editions in a book haul a while ago. We started talking about it, but Joseph hit me up with an email so we can kind of coordinate that, come up with a time that works for both of us to do some sort of video on that. So really excited to collaborate with Joseph on that one. Another one I'll be collaborating with is Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny. Now I'll be reading this more towards the end of the month with Chris over at Liminal Spaces. And we're going to try to put together some sort of video probably in September for this one. So this is another one. It's been on my bucket list reads for a really long time. And really excited. Chris over Liminal Spaces, the way he can dig down and do these deep dives. I'm a little intimidated. I hope I can keep up. But really excited for that one. There is one other collaboration I'm going to do. I'm not going to show you the book because I don't know if it's a secret or not or anything. But we've got Jake over at Pulp Mortem. We've got Nick at the Book Graveyard and Tim at Secret Fire Books. And Jake has kind of come up with this kind of series almost. I think it's called like the Reclusive Abusive Book Club or something like that. Maybe it's something different. I don't know. Maybe that was just when they were going over Death World. But they were kind enough to invite me for this next read of theirs. It's a pretty short book. It's an author I've really wanted to read, and I'm really excited for that one and to collaborate with these guys. I hope I can keep up with the wit there because they're some pretty funny guys. So excited about that one as well. Now there's a few other books that I'm going to try to read in between some of these others, depending on schedule and whatnot. The first one is Michael G. Coney's Racks. And I know this has a different title, I think, in the UK. Michael Coney is a UK-based author, I believe. And I think it's called Goodbye Summer or something like that. But they called it Racks in the US. And I haven't read anything from Coney yet. And it looks like one of his most popular books. And I figured I got this nice doll paperback, and I'd go ahead and give that a shot. Next up, another one I want to read is the Cyber Raid by Stanislaw Lem. I have yet to read anything from Lem. I've tried to read Solaris a few times and just didn't really get into it when I was younger. So this, from what I could tell, it's some short stories, some comedy thrown in. I think I'll maybe kind of get used to his writing a little bit, and later on I'm going to be reading Solaris as well. And then another one is Brute Orbits by George Zabrowski. If I get time to read this one, it's a little bit of a longer read, but that's another one that I'm going to try to fit in this month. But other than that, like I said, really excited for August. A couple different collaborations going, some really interesting books that I've been wanting to read for a long time. So once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.